Welcome, y'all. Thanks for coming. My name is Milton Davis. I am a author slash publisher, and I specialize in science fiction and fantasy based on African diaspora culture and traditions. And so today I'm going to be talking about a couple of books that I have out right now. I've been writing since 2008. I've written about 30 novels since that time. I've published about 12 anthologies. I've been a part of different. More recently. I was in the Black Panther Tales of Wakanda anthology. I wrote a story for that. I also was part of an editorial group for the 2022 Best African Speculative Fiction Stories, which got nominated for an award and stuff like that. So I've been doing this for a minute. But today I wanted to really do something in the neighborhood. I don't live far from here, and this is a cool bookstore, and I wanted to talk about a couple of books that I got out right now that I want to highlight. When I first started writing, I tried to stay away from incorporating my personal life into a lot of stuff that I wrote. Right, science fiction and fantasy, I just didn't want to do that. But as I got older, and I started thinking a lot about the time period that I grew up and stuff like that, I felt like I needed to leave some kind of stories that kind of reflected on that. I was born in 1960. Grew up during the 60s and the 70s and stuff like that, and in the South. So, and I guess as I got older, those stories became more important to me. It made me realize how unique it was, where we grew up and how we grew up and stuff like that. So I wrote this book called Muscadine Wine. It's a collection of short stories, and each of the stories are based on personal experiences and experiences in general about growing up in the South and incorporating different things like that into it. And as a matter of fact, the Muscadine Wine story with the art here is loosely based on how my mother met my father back in the 1930s and stuff. So I kind of did it based on that. But I'm going to read an excerpt from one of the stories here. And I also have another book that I have here. It's called Space Funk. And the unique thing about that is, as a Black author, especially a Black science fiction author, there's certain ways people want you to write. And so I started a series of anthologies I call the Funk Anthologies. And another indication that I grew up in the 70s. But what I do with those anthologies is that I give Black authors the opportunity to write in genres the way that they want to write in them, without the restrictions that you normally run into when you're dealing with mainstream publishers. And we've got 5 different anthologies. We've got Steam Funk, Diesel Funk, Spy Funk, Cyber Funk, and the most recent one is Space Funk. And that's actually the biggest one we've ever done. We got more authors than we ever had, because Black folks want to write about space. so that's basically what we did. We got some of the top Black science fiction authors in that anthology. We've got authors from around the world. We've got authors from Brazil, from Nigeria, from Kenya, from what's the other one? In Central America. I can't think of it right now. But we were able to get a wide spectrum of authors and stuff and have them tell stories that are like, about space, but also has influences from their cultures as well. So I want to read a little short thing out that one. But the first one I want to start with is Muscadine Wine. And this particular story, most of them are fantastic, but this one is more conventional fiction, and it's based on the only conversation I ever had with my grandfather on my mother's side. It wasn't because he was not a nice person. It was just that he was a person that whenever we went out to the farm, because my mom and dad's farm, they still have the farm now, and we would go out there and visit. He would go into his shed. He'd give us a Coke, a piece of sugar cane, a box of Cracker Jacks, and then he'd walk off. And that's basically what he'd do. We'd come out there, that's what he'd do. So one day I was out on the farm. I was older then, I was a teenager then. And I was into hunting and fishing and stuff like that, country boy, So, and I was supposed to be going hunting with one of my uncles. And when I got out there, my uncle had already gone. And my grandfather came up to me and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm supposed to be going hunting. He said, well, my uncle Willie said, he's already gone. He said, I'll take you. And so I was like, okay. And I didn't hunt the entire time because we spent the whole time just walking around the farm, and he was just telling me these stories about different things and stuff like that. And so we didn't hunt at all. And so this story is loosely based on that and some other things that I guess I've encountered growing up in the South, different things like that, and I wanted to kind of touch on. So I'm just going to read the first part of it, just enough to tease y'all so you'll buy the book. But just to give you, just wanted to give you some background on that story. Okay. Um, Michael felt heat radiating from his wood panel bedroom wall and sprang from his bed. The smell of bacon wafted into his room as he hurried into jeans and sweatshirt he set out the night before, resting on his tennis shoes, and trotted through the narrow hallway into the kitchen. Mama stood before the stove, one hand holding the black iron skillet in place, while the other scrambled a pair of eggs in a hot pool of bacon grease. "What you doing up so early, boy?" she asked without looking. Michael sat at the dinette, holding his eager hands under his chin. "You going to Grandma's?" Mama scrapped the scrambled eggs onto a plate. "I go out there every Saturday morning. You know that." Michael played with the napkin holder, rocking his head from side to side. "Can I go?" Mama was reaching for the grits, but stopped, placing her hand on her broad hips. "Now, why in the world do you want to go with me?" "Because I want to go hunting." Mama rolled her eyes. "You and that gun. I told your daddy not to buy you that thing unless he was ready to go hunting with you. His tired behind ain't been out with you yet." She scooped a spoonful of grits on the plate to join the eggs and bacon. "You know you can't go by yourself, and your daddy ain't waking up no time soon." Michael smothered his grits with pepper. "Uncle Willie would take me." "How you know he going hunting today? This close to harvest time, he's probably got chores." Michael piled his eggs on top of his grits with the pepper and crumbled the bacon in his hands. "I called him last night, and he said he was going." Mama turned around and looked at him, her eyes wide. "You did what?" She shook her head. "Lord, Lord, what am I going to do with you?" She began to make her own plate and stopped. "What about that book report you're supposed to be working on? You finished it yet?" "No, ma'am." "No? And how you expect to go with me if you got homework to do?" "I'll finish it as soon as I get home, Mama. I promise." Mama turned to look at Michael. "What you writing about?" Michael spread apple jelly on his toast. "I'm supposed to be writing about my hero. I'm thinking about Frederick Douglass." Mama finished her plate before Michael finished his plate before Mama sat down. "I guess you can go," she said. "But we ain't leaving until I'm ready to. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am. And I want to see that book report after church tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am." Michael jumped from the table and ran to Mama and Daddy's room to get his .22 rifle. He hoarded his lawn cutting money all summer just about as a birthday present to himself. It was a Springfield Savage .22 semi-automatic long rifle, the perfect gun for squirrel and rabbit hunting, or so the sales clerk at Sears said. Michael eased the door open and crept crept to the closet behind the bed. Daddy was stretched out on top of the covers in his boxer short and t-shirt, snoring through his thick mustache. The closet door creaked when Michael slid it aside, and Daddy's hand came up to scratch his sideburns. Michael froze until he stopped scratching, then slid the door wide open. The gun was hidden behind Mama's Sunday dresses. He took it out, then went to Daddy's loose change drawer where he kept the bullets. There was a brand new pack of 100 shells that felt like money in the boy's hand. Michael strode into the kitchen, carrying the rifle the way Daddy taught him. Mama looked up from a cup of coffee and grinned despite herself. "You look like your Uncle Bo when he was your age," she said. She got up from the table and headed for the bedroom. "Guess I better get ready. The day ain't getting no longer." Michael washed his plate, then went to the den. He laid his gun down on the floor and then turned on TV to watch cartoons. He'd almost forgotten about going with Mama when she came in the den. "Cut that mess off and let's go," she said. Michael scrambled to his feet, turned off the TV, and then grabbed the gun and bullets. "Now remember what I said. We don't leave till I'm ready." "Yes, ma'am." "And if your Uncle Willie can't take you hunting, you don't go." "Yes, ma'am." "All right, then. Let's go." Michael trailed Mama out the door to the carport to the '67 Sky Blue Malibu. In moments, they were zooming through the neighborhood, down steep hills between the little water oaks the city had planted to beautify the landscape. Mama worked her way through the side streets and shortcuts with the seriousness of a NASCAR driver, reaching Macon Road, the two-lane highway that ran to Grandma's farm. The sky was a crisp autumn blue, empty of the gray haze that sagged low during the summer. The summer morning spread its light across the pine-infested hills. It felt like hunting season, and Michael was excited. He watched the familiar landmarks flash by from his backseat window until he saw the solitary shack that signaled the farm wasn't far away. Mama finally slowed down as the roadside mailboxes came into view. She steered off the path highway and onto the dirt road. She was creeping as they approached the railroad crossing. Only the section crossing of the road was visible, the rest blocked by a tangle of scrub pines and honeysuckle vines. Mama turned left across the track. She drove through a gauntlet of blackberry vines that made Michael's mouth water as he remembered blackberry pie and ice cream. They turned right at the hog pens. The house appeared, flanked by the corn and pea fields. Mama drove down the road to the rear of the house, parking between the house and the shed. Michael jumped out the car before Mama came to a complete stop, his impatient eyes searching for Uncle Willie. His euphoria was checked by a jerk of his arm that almost lifted him off his feet. Boy, don't you ever jump out of a car like that again. Mama's face was getting me a switch angry. Don't go hitting on that boy, a much older female voice growled. Grandma stood at the screen door of the back patio. Michael blessed her for saving him from what surely was going to be a whooping, or at least a pinch on the arm. She eased down the concrete stairs, wiping her hands on her apron. Did you see what he did? Mama said. He ain't hurt. You'll know better next time, won't you, Michael? Yes, ma'am. Michael followed Mama and Grandma up the stairs. Since he made Mama mad, he sat beside the women in an old folding chair, took his share of the butter beans from the bushel, and began shelling. He kept his eyes low and peeled as they talked, waiting for the right moment to ask the question that was burning to get out of his throat. Mama stopped talking as she grabbed another handful of beans. Michael cleared his throat and looked up at Grandma. Grandma, is Uncle Willie here? Shoot, boy. Uncle Willie went hunting right about sunup. He won't be back until dark. Michael slumped over like he'd been hit by a brick. He looked at Mama with pleading eyes. I told you no hunting by yourself with that gun, she reminded him. I'll take him. Grandpa shuffled in from the kitchen, his hands deep in his overall pockets. He smiled at Michael, flashing his gold tooth, and Michael was filled with dread. You feel like hunting today, Daddy? Mama asked. You supposed to be resting. I don't want to go hunting no more, Michael whispered. I feel fine, Grandpa replied, pulling his right hand out of his pocket. Michael watched the gnarled, scarred appendage rise out to the old man's bald head. It was hideous, like something from a freak show at the fair. When he was small, he always was careful to avoid touching or being touched by that hand and its mirror twin. He thought when he was older, he'd get over the fear, but it was still clinging to him as real as ever. I don't want to go hunting no more, he said. Is it all right? Mama asked Grandpa. Grandma concentrated on the peas. The doctor said he needed to get some exercise. I don't want to go hunting no more, Michael shouted. Boy, can't you see grown folks talking? Mama nailed him still with her stare, then returned to her conversation. Well, Papa, I guess it's okay, but you keep a close eye on him. He can get wild sometimes. What you mean you guess it's okay? Grandpa said. I'll take this boy anywhere I want to. Come on, Michael. Let's go hunting. Michael watched the back of Grandpa's head as he bounced down the stairs. He looked at Mama in desperation. What you waiting on? Go on now. Michael turned and followed Grandpa down the stairs. He could do this. He was 12 going on 13 with 2 hairs on his chest and the start of a mustache on his upper lip. His confidence had almost returned until he caught a glimpse of those hands pull out a pouch of Red Man chewing tobacco. He jumped past Grandpa and trotted to the car to get his .22. What you gonna kill with that? Time? Michael ignored the comment, holding the gun toward the ground like Dad had taught him and making sure his safety was on. Squirrels and rabbits, sir, he said. Grandpa laughed like a wet growl. Can't kill no squirrels with that thing. Ain't gonna do nothing but make them mad. Should have brought my shotgun. Grandpa started walking, and Michael followed, afraid to say where he wanted to hunt. They followed the trail branching off the dirt road that cut between the barn and the old mule stables. No, can't kill nothing with that thing, Grandpa said. Can't kill it right, I mean. You shoot a squirrel with that and it'll be running around mad, hurting, and hiding. A shotgun will put him down just like that. Grandpa stopped walking, and Michael almost ran into him. See this? He asked, pointing at a dent between his right thumb and his finger. Shot a squirrel one time and thought it was dead. I guess I should have asked it before I went to picking it up. Damn thing took a hold of me right there like a beaver trap. Took a half an hour to get it loose, and it was dead half that time. Michael looked at the spot and grimaced, imagining how painful it must have felt. Suddenly the scar and the hand were gone, sinking back into Grandpa's pocket. They walked to the second hog pen where the trail ended, the air heavy with the stink of swamp mud and hog droppings. Before them was the turnip green field, the fall planting full and ready for harvest. Grandpa walked into the field and over the barbed wire fence separating the field to the woods. Michael hadn't planned on going to those trees. It was a tangle of pine, oaks, and muscadine vines that seemed perpetually dark, and it repulsed the sun's attempt to penetrate its core. Blind obedience only went so far. Grandpa, where we going? You want to shoot squirrels, don't you? Michael reluctantly nodded his head. Well, this is the best spot for them. At least it was a while back. Come over here and hold this wire down for me. Michael sat the gun down on the opposite side of the fence, then grabbed the wire carefully, pushing down it with his weight. Grandpa stepped over, his hand gripping Michael's shoulder for support. Michael closed his eyes, keeping his head away from that hand. Gots to be careful, Grandpa said as he grunted his way over the fence. Once he and Michael were settled, he showed him his left hand. When I was about your Uncle Willie's age, I worked for a white man named Mr. Elias Burnside in his sawmill. It was hard work back then because a colored man did whatever the boss said do, even if it wasn't your job. Well, one day I was putting up a fence like this one on Mr. Burnside's farm, and before I knew it, I was up to my ankles in fire ants. Boy, I got to jumping around and screaming and tore my hand on that barbed wire. Took me a long time to get this hand back right. Michael climbed over the fence. The woods towered before him like in black silence, its stillness a final warning to all intruders. Michael's eyes went to Grandpa, waiting for him to lead the way. Instead, Grandpa reached into his pocket, pulled out his red man chewing tobacco, and leaned against the fence. We'll stay here and wait, Grandpa said. They'll come to us. And that's a portion of Grandpa's hands. There's a thing about his hands that if you read the rest of the story, you will encounter. but yeah, that's part of that story right there. Like I told y'all earlier, this book is it's a collection of space stories by Black authors. They're from different parts of the world. We've got poetry in here. Some of the authors here, like for instance, Linda Addison and Cherie Renee Thomas, Eugene Bacon are some of the top Black science fiction authors out today. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of them, and when I put out the call for this book, I was surprised at the response I got. This is the biggest anthology that we've done so far. The story that I want to read to you guys is, I'm going to be selfish and actually read my story, a portion of my story. And it's a story I wrote a long time ago, but recently there's been a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and stuff like that. And in this story, I was actually imagining artificial intelligence and how it would be used in space travel. And it also came from, part of the story came from the person that this book is dedicated to, an author by the name of Valjean Jeffers. Valjean is no longer with us, but she was an amazing science fiction author and poet. And we used to hang out online together. And I had never read anybody do any science fiction poetry before. And so I put out a challenge. I said, look, if somebody would write a science fiction poem, I'll write a story based on that poem. And Valjean did. And she sent this poem called Leviathan. And I'm like, okay, now I got to put my money where my mouth is. Now I got to write a story. So basically, the name of the story is Leviathan. And it starts with the poem. And then I go into the story. I don't talk so loud, but yeah, I feel the fun and everything. So I'll try to project more. So I'm going to read the poem first, and then I'll read a portion of the story. Leviathan of flesh and steel, racing through streets soaring garment of technological genius. His fist crushed tons of debris to dust. His sight travels miles over designated horizons. torn from his life, crushed, disemboweled by madness, inferno and stone, to be reconstructed by humanoid hands, and I'd rather be dead. He remembers the whisper of a lover's breath on his cheek, the head he cradled so gently against his shoulder, and he has no tear ducts to give voice to his sorrow. Only the dreams of his hardwired heart, never forgotten, imaginings of her soft caress upon his metal brow. Space Marshal Balagoon Babatunde posed before the view shield of Launch Station 5, his rugged brown face creased with a broad smile. Behind him, United Nations delegation gazed in awe at the sight beyond the platform jutting into the void. 10 sleek vessels hovered in zero gravity, tethered to the hangar beam by a web of massive titanium cables. From a distance, they resembled normal fighter craft, minus the cockpit. But the delegation knew each ship was the size of Earth's moon, an unbelievable example of human ingenuity, effort, and desperation. Balogun turned to his colleagues and his smile grew wider. Well, everyone, what do you think? They're amazing, John Raddick replied. A tall, narrow man with a beak nose and straw blonde hair, Raddick served as UN Vice Secretary. He was a successful American billionaire who paid for his position with the council and was easily impressed. The Space Marshal dismissed his comment, focusing on the one person whose opinion mattered more, the one who could make or break his project. Her expression was less impressive. The mechanics are simple, Felicite Mbeke commented. I'm more concerned about the control system. Felicite Mbeke, the Nigerian vice chairperson overseeing the Leviathan project, was a striking woman with flawless brown skin and intense amber eyes. She held a PhD in space engineering and was not easily impressed. Balagoon's smile faded. The control system is fine. Felicite cut her eyes at the Space Marshal. The control system is untested. Yuen Hao cleared his throat, looking up at both of them. AI has proven technology. You know this, Fola. The Taiwanese delegate and AI specialist stood beside the Space Marshal. He was as tall and broad as the Space Marshal, with empathetic eyes that revealed his support for the project. Yes, but only for military purposes, she answered. I understand the gravity of the situation. The signal from the Tepec left no doubt that they intend to attack us. So much for friendly first contact, John whispered. I'm not comfortable with thinking weapons, Felicite finished. That's why I insisted you come. The Space Marshal broke from the group, crossing the room to an instrument panel opposite the view screen. Begin demonstration, he ordered. The titanium cables separated from the ships, floating to rest in the cold vacuum. Engine ports glowed white-hot as the vehicles prepared themselves for maneuvers. Balagoon activated his earpiece. Leviathan 1, commence cross-check. Are you talking to the ship? Felicite asked. Of course, Balagoon replied. The Leviathans have been taught to recognize and respond to all Earth languages. Of course, they also interpret binary code and other basic speak. This is Leviathan 1, the metallic voice responded. Cross-check is complete. Felicite edged toward the view screen. How do they receive assignments? We briefed the pod leader and he relays the orders to the team. Felicite looked confused. The pod leader? The Leviathans are infused with pod social behavior. They work as a group, adapt and learn behavior to determine each ship's responsibility. Leviathan 1 is the most intelligent of the 10. The others selected him to be the pod leader, so we don't expect any problems with the command structure. Felicite stared and Balagoon smiled. You must understand these are semi-sentient craft, Balagoon explained. They are designed to operate independently. This means they must be allowed to make their own decisions. We give them an objective and a desired result. It's up to them to determine the course of action. That's too much independence, Felicite argued. Balagoon frowned at the diplomat, disappointed by their ignorance. When these ships reach their destinations, we will be dead, our children will be dead, and our children's children will be dead. In addition, the nature of the threat may have drastically changed. The Leviathans must be prepared to assess situations and adjust the plan to obtain the objective. How do you know they'll stick to the plan? She asked. Balagoon's face became stern. Some things aren't not left to chance. It's the one command they cannot alter. The ships remained motionless. Balagoon repeated the command. Leviathan 1, begin exercise. Leviathan 1 didn't respond. Sweat formed on Balagoon's forehead. Jennings, run a communication sequence. Airman Jennings' fingers ran across the LED board. Communications functionally normally, sir. Folicade came face to face with Balagoon. What seems to be the problem, Commander? Balagoon cleared his throat. I don't know. He swam in a sea of memories, grasping for schools of shimmering metaphors that scattered before him, arms stroked that he could not see, legs kicked that he could not feel. Somehow, he knew they were there. The only sensations were the cold of the water and the pain in his heart. Words formed a beach of consciousness that called him with the rush of desire. She was there. She waited for him. He had to see her. She needed to know. He stepped out of the memories onto a beach of white silicone, a cold wind tingling his surface. He gazed upward into the sensors, eyes into an intense brightness that spoke to him in 1,000 languages, each phrase issuing the same command. Program malfunction. Return to standby. Await further instructions. The brightness was too intense. The memories evaporated with the increasing light, confusing him. He turned and ran back into the sea, flailing to get away from the glare. He dove deeper to escape the light and the memories surrounding him in a swirling dance. Images returned, faces formed, and names appeared. One name danced about his head, just out of his reach. It was a good name, a familiar name, his name. And that's that. But anyway, I have these books here today, and if you want to purchase them, you can purchase them up front. I'll sign the stories and stuff like that. I also brought a couple of other books with me as well. If you have any middle grade people in the middle grade readers in your family, I brought a book that I wrote a few years ago called Amber in the Hidden City. It's about a young African American girl who finds out she's the only person that can pick the next king of an African kingdom that's been hidden from the rest of the world for 1,000 years. And her grandmother is from that kingdom and would tell Amber these stories, stories about her life, which Amber thought were fairy tales, but now she knows they were actually true. So now she's on this adventure with her grandmother to go back to this kingdom and fulfill her prophecy, I guess you can say that. I have the first book and the second book here. And for those of you who are into cozy holiday romance books, because I write a little bit of everything, I have another book here called Palmetto Christmas. And it's about an older couple, empty nesters, kids are grown and gone, who have decided they want to take a vacation during Christmas and they've always been at home every year, but they want to go to an island and hang out and stuff like that. But then through a series of circumstances, they find out that they're not going to be going by themselves. All of their children somehow are going to end up with them on that same vacation. And I guess you can say hilarity ensues. but that's what I have with me today. And thank y'all for taking your time to check me out. And if y'all have any questions right now, I'd be more than happy to answer. Well, I started, and I still am a self-publisher. And I did it because I wanted to be able to write my books exactly the way I wanted to write them. And at the time, and even now, still, Black authors have challenges in getting their work published because people have certain perceptions of what we should be writing and how we should be writing it. It's not as bad as it was when I first started, but when I first started, I kind of looked at I researched the industry, and I was like, nobody's going to accept my stories the way that I want to write them. So I started writing them myself, started self-publishing myself. And I also published a few other authors. That's why I started the anthologies, because when I started doing it, I said, well, I know there's other authors who probably have run into the same things I've run into, and they would, be looking for an opportunity. So that's why I started doing it. So now I'm here 20 years later, and I'm what's called a hybrid publisher now, because now I get published in mainstream published works. But that wouldn't have happened if I had not self-published. I was able to develop a reputation about my writing by doing it on my own. And that kind of translated. And now that's kind of the common thing now. A lot of authors now are like doing both. They'll publish their own work, and then they'll publish mainstream as well. It just depends on the situation. They'll have an agent to promote themselves with the mainstream publishing, but then they'll do their own personal work and publish that themselves. And what happens sometimes what happens when your self-published stuff gets really big, then the mainstream publishing people will come and say, hey, we want to publish that. And then you can, that way you can get an agent and go through them and then and access that market and stuff. But
What platform do you use to self-publish? I don't know anything about it, so the question sounds kind of. But what platform do you use, or what's the process?
The process, I basically now I use a manuscript software to create my manuscripts and stuff. I use Word to do my stuff. Once I get my books formatted, there's a company called what they would call Lightning Source back in the day, but now they call themselves Ingram. And what Ingram will do is once you format everything and send it to them, they will create your book for you, and you can get your book print on demand. You can order one book from them, you can order 100 books from them, and they'll print them for you. As far as distribution is concerned, if you want to get distribution, they also are the largest book distribution company in the country, and they basically will, if they'll for a fee, they will make your book available to bookstores like this, Barnes and Nobles, any place that sells books. They'll make your books available like that. So that's what they'll do. Amazon also will do it. Amazon will also has a print-on-demand business as well. The advantage of using Amazon's print-on-demand is that if you sell your books on Amazon, they're cheaper for you to print. But just recently, Amazon went up on their prices big time, because of what we're going through with the tariff situation. And a lot of my friends that use Amazon are not very happy right now because that's biting into their profit margins and stuff like that, So there's a number of ways to do it now. There's ebooks, which are big. There's actually a company called Draft Digital that I use right now, which they basically will distribute your ebook to different people. So you go set your ebook up with them, and then they'll make your ebook available for Kindle and all the other e-readers, to libraries and stuff like that, So this is just like a one-stop shop, that kind of thing. You don't pay them. What they do is that they take a percentage when you sell. If you're thinking about being an author and you're looking at doing something, anybody that tells you that you have to pay them to produce your book, as far as like we're gonna be your publisher and we're gonna sell your book, but you have to pay us to publish your book, don't mess with them, because a real publisher is not going to charge you to sell your book. They're not going to do that.
And what's the name of the one-stop shop?
I would take a look at Ingram LSI. Now understand that these people don't market your stuff.
Yeah.
All they're going to do is print your book for you and make it available to you when you need it. But they don't do marketing. They don't do anything like that. That's all going.
The last one that you mentioned.
Talking about Amazon,
No.
LSI. Oh, Drafted Digital. Yeah, Drafted Digital. They do now. So they started exclusively as ebooks, but now recently they've gotten into print, and they've also gotten into audiobooks, and they make all that stuff available to you. Of course, all that costs for them to do it for you and stuff. But they've kind of went the opposite way. Where other people started with hard copy and went to ebooks, they started exclusively ebooks, and then now they've kind of drifted into the other area and stuff like that. So, trying to become like a one-stop shop type place.
But
If it's just you,
yeah.
you don't have to worry about all that stuff. You can just, if you can get the right setup, the right room and stuff like that, you can create your own audiobooks. The Amazon is probably one of the most popular people right now with Audible, but a lot of people don't like to use Amazon because they take the majority of the profit. They take like about 60%, something like that. And it used to be the other way till they found out they thought they had a monopoly on the thing. Then they switch it around and stuff like that. So, and with them basically they give you voice actors you can pick and select and stuff like that. They give you the whole 9 yards and all that kind of stuff. But the consequence is that you don't get a lot of the profit, stuff like that. But it does. I know some people that do it themselves, but the more professional you can do it in a studio setting, to cut out the noise and have somebody that can edit it for you, when you make mistakes and stuff, like Daryl here, he can edit stuff like that. The more professional you can do it, the better it's going to be, and some people, I don't have the voice for it, but I know some authors who have the voice to do their own audiobooks. You know, me personally, I'd rather find somebody that can do it themselves. I know a friend of mine who's an author who also has an audiobook company, and he basically, he gets you send him the story. He has a number of voice people that he works with. He'll check with them and see which ones, because it is a thing. A voice actor has to want to read your story. Sometimes they don't really like your story, so they don't want to read it. It's like that. And then based on how their pacing is, he can figure out how much it's going to cost you per hour to pay that person, how much how much it's going to cost you, and that kind of stuff like that. Right. And then there are some companies that's all they do is audiobook stuff. There's other people other than Audible that can do audiobook stuff for you, and they will tell you how much it's going to cost you based on how long the work is and stuff like that. And when you upload to Audible, though, Audible doesn't pay you as much if you upload your own audiobook with them as if they were to do it. But there's software out there where, because on my particular website, I can do audiobooks and I can sell them from my website. And there is software out there where people can listen to my stuff, and don't have to use Audible and stuff like. They can just listen to it straight from that stuff. So there are ways around it, and that's the way I prefer to do it. The only thing about doing it yourself is that audiobooks are expensive. Like this particular book, we had our guy take a look at it because he said, oh man, we got to do an audiobook of this thing. It would cost me $6,000 to do this as an audiobook. I mean, that'd be my upfront cost just to get that. Now, once I pay that $6,000 now, and I get the audiobook, then it's straight profit because it's just electronic data. So if I got the money to do it, yeah, everything else, everything after that is gravy. But see, I'm kind of like you. I have some audiobooks, but for the life of me, I cannot listen to an audiobook. I just can't do it. I had one audio voice actor that did two of my books, and it was interesting because people were like, "Yeah, I really love her on this book," and then somebody else said, that was a good book, but I could not stand that voice actor. And I'm surprised they got to it because of the way they were talking about. So, and that's a personal thing. You really don't know who's, you know. But there are a lot of good voice actors out there. I've run into them just from the fact that I'm out here selling my books. Sometimes one of them will read a book of mine and they'll be like, "Oh man, I really want to do this for you, man. I would love to do this," and stuff like that. One of the curious things about doing audiobooks, especially through Amazon, I'm just gonna be honest with you, that sometimes the voice actors will ghost on you. They will start doing the work for you, and then all of a sudden you're not hearing from them anymore. And I'm like, well, and then you're like, well, what's going on? And you can't find them or anything. And I've had it happen to me a couple of times. There was one woman I was working with. She was doing one of my books, and she was amazing. I mean, she was, because my books is like, a lot of my books are like African based. She was doing the African accents. She was hitting. I was like, oh man, this is going to be a great book. I just couldn't wait for her to finish it. And then she was gone, and and I wasn't able to find her. I have done them, not usually through something else, like in October, the Atlanta Writers Club has a indie author conference that they do every year, and actually I'm doing a seminar with them this year. I'm going to be talking about selling and marketing your books to beginning authors, and I've done that a couple of times there. And the ironic thing about this, and I have to talk about this, is that when I first started writing, and I first went to the Atlanta Writers Club, they didn't want to have anything to do with indie authors. I like, it was like I went there and I was like wasting my time. They had no time for indie authors. And now here I am 20 years later, and I'm doing presentations at the Atlanta Writers Club about indie author stuff, because that's where most authors are now. That's the space that they're in now, and that's the stuff that they want to know. But at least I guess they were conscious enough to realize that their audience and the people that they're serving, this is what they want. They do want to know about mainstream publishing, but they also want to know about indie publishing. And so they responded to it, and they've been, providing those resources and stuff. Yeah, I've done that on all levels. I've been to elementary schools, I've done high schools, I've done college stuff. I do a lot of stuff with Georgia Tech. They've been supporting what we've been doing locally for a long time, and we've got a really good relationship with them and talking to their students and stuff like that. And I think that's a big part of it, because I know when I first started out, there's so many pitfalls you can run into as a writer trying to get into it. There's so many people out there waiting to rip you off, there's so many horror stories. But I was lucky enough, and I'm just gonna say plain lucky, because I didn't know what I was doing, to meet people who right off the bat were looking to help. One of the first people that helped me was the brother that owns Nubian Bookstore. I knew nothing about making books and creating books, and I just walked into his store, and my naive self, I said, "Hey man, if I make a book, will you sell it?" And he said, "Well, do you have somebody do your manuscript?" I was like, "Nope." He said, "Do you have somebody do your cover?" I said, "Nope." And then he went and he gave me the cards and said, "Get in contact with these people, and they'll help you put your book together. And once you have your book together," he said, "bring it back to me. I'll take a look at it. If I like it, then I'll schedule a time where you can come in and sell your book." And so all the horror stories that I heard other people talk about and trying to publish and self-publish, I didn't run into any of that, because of the fact that he was just there. And there were some other authors that were like mainstream published authors that I encountered online. And I'm like, these people have no reason to talk to me. They're doing their thing. And just for the hell of it, I just said, "Look, I'll ask them." All they can do is say no. And they were kind enough to say, "Hey, yeah, I'll write a review for your book. I'll take a look at it and stuff." And I kind of felt like, because that happened with me, I felt like I'm obligated to do the same thing. So when I run into new authors and stuff like that, I kind of offer the same thing. I'm like, "Yeah, you need to look at this person. You need to talk to these people. You need to go to this resource and stuff like that, and you need to check this out," that kind of thing. So I think that's part of it. I like to do that because of the fact that excuse me, people did it for me, and especially for Black authors, because it's everything for us is always a whole nother angle and stuff like that. It's gotten better, but still, you still have to have those people who understand your journey, and they feel that journey. It's just not going different steps. You know the stuff that you're going to deal with, so you can give them that little extra push or that little extra information that they need in order to get them around those obstacles and stuff like that. So I think that is part of it, being able to reach back and help other authors and talk to other authors about stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good, some great questions. Any other questions, comments, curses? Well, I appreciate y'all. Appreciate y'all coming by. Like I said, we got the books available here. Books you can also order my books through this bookstore. I do sell them directly from my website. The good thing about today, though, is if you buy them today, you get them signed by the author.
Yeah.
Yeah.